So welcome everyone to IAP2 Intermountains Learning Lunch. This month, I am really excited about what we're going to learn today. It's about the engagement process for The Point. 600 acres located at the border of Salt Lake and Utah County here in Utah. I am Elizabeth Bueller. I am IAP2 Intermountains Vice President, and I am the facilitator for this Learning Lunch series. Thank you everyone for joining us. And at the end of today's session, we'll be talking about some upcoming learning lunches, and we'd love for you to join us there as well. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Muriel with X Factor Communications to talk about this great project.
Perfect. Thanks, Liz. As Liz mentioned, my name is Muriel Sochmil. I am the president and CEO of X Factor Strategic Communications. X Factor is contracted with the Point of the Mountain State Land Authority, so the state entity that's overseeing redevelopment of the prison site. My team includes Brittany Johnston, Director of Strategic Communications, as well as Colton Stock, Communications Coordinator for X Factor. Marithel Holmquist, Communications Coordinator as well. Leah, did you want to introduce yourself briefly as well?
Sure. I am Leah Jaramillo with David Evans and Associates. I am a Senior Public Engagement Manager, and I joined the Point Framework Master Plan team, which was led by Skidmore, Owings, and Merrill. And so my role was to support Muriel's team in the development of the framework plan, which is what we're going to be talking about today.
You guys all know Leah. She needs no introduction. Well, perfect. Well, thank you so much for taking the time today. We do have a presentation prepared, and so let's go ahead, Colton, and pull that up. I bet you guys are asking, what's the point? Some of you are probably familiar with this project, and others maybe not so much. So as Liz mentioned, Colton, let's go ahead and go to the next slide. Perfect. This is 600 acres of prime developable land that is state-owned, meaning it's owned by all Utahns, right? It is right there at the epicenter of Utah's two most populous counties, Salt Lake and Utah counties, right in the heart of our largest labor sheds, and in the epicenter of the fastest growing part of the state in the fastest growing part of the country. As many of you know, the state prison has been here since 1950, so about 70 years. And there's been a lot of growth around the area. The legislature several years ago made the decision to relocate inmates to a new correctional facility that's being built west of the Salt Lake International Airport. So it opens up this really generational opportunity to do something truly unique here at the Point. Which is what we're dubbing essentially the land here at that 600 acres. With that, I am going to have Colton play a video for us that can explain better than I exactly the significance of the site.
Most people in the state know that the existing correctional facility at the point of the mountain is going to be moved, which means that this land is going to be available for development. That area will be known as the Point.
The new prison is expected to be completed in mid-2022. At that point, we'll start looking at demolition of the site and site preparation for development.
There's really not much like this anywhere in the world where you have 700 acres located in a densely populated area in the heart of Silicon Slopes. This is unlike anything we've seen in the history of the state of Utah and a rare opportunity in the United States or anywhere in the world.
We have one of the most vibrant technology scenes in the country, maybe even the world. The epicenter of Utah's Silicon Slopes is really at that prison site. And so we'll have the opportunity to have this blank slate that can be programmed to help accelerate additional growth, additional opportunity, so that we can see a major campus form there, a campus that's environmentally sustainable, that is focused and centered around research and innovation, that is a job center, that allows people who live and work in the site to access the beautiful outdoors that we have here in the state of Utah.
Our approach has been to think big. The Point will be impressive. This will be a unique place for innovation, for technology, for research, and vibrant growth with an eye towards quality of life, transportation, air quality.
This will be a place that is not just about corporations or buildings, it's about community, it's about people. There will be some residential and commercial. Certainly, we think it's important to have recreation and open space.
We want to make sure that future generations look back on what we did here and they can be proud of those decisions, making sure that it doesn't impact traffic negatively, that it doesn't impact air quality negatively, that this can actually be a model for future development so that we can add people without lowering the quality of life and diminishing what makes the state the best place to live, work, and play.
The reality is that we're not going to be able to stop growth, but we can grow in ways that preserve what we value most. That's our commitment at this site.
Perfect. Let's go ahead and get that slide deck back up. So that explains a little bit about the significance of the site. You heard from our current governor, Spencer Cox, who was at the time that we filmed that video, co-chair of our board, and the lieutenant governor. Just wanted to kind of take a step back. When it comes to the work at the site, it's been happening for many, many years, actually, with a lot of robust public engagement. So stepping back a little bit, a separate entity to our client called the Point of the Mountain Development Commission was created in 2014 to pretty much develop a broader regional vision for the Point of the Mountain area. And that was a 2-year process from 2016 to 2018, where the Development Commission hired Envision Utah. Many of you know Envision Utah as a nonprofit organization based here in Utah that does a lot of visioning to develop, essentially, again, a broader regional vision for the Point of the Mountain area. And what they found was that if the 20,000 of undeveloped acres in the broader region were developed strategically, there would be significant financial and quality of life benefits to Utahns. And you can see some of those metrics there. What I wanted to highlight, though, with the commission's visioning work was their public engagement. So they engaged with over 4,000 Utahns through a series of various public engagement tactics like survey research. They also, as you see here to the right, some metrics, to kind of showcase some of their work when it came to public workshops, presentations across the state. And the reason I bring this up is because we have been working for many, many years to engage the public on the site and the broader region. Let's go to the next slide. So some of you may be familiar with this. This is the vision map that was created through that process. And it articulated a lot of things that Utahns said that they wanted. Everything from a highly trained workforce at the site, better air quality, reduced resource use, water use. We live in a desert during exceptional drought conditions. The public wanted better connected trails, park systems, and open space, kind of a vibrant urban center here, jobs close to where people live, so kind of the quintessential live, work, and play environment. A variety of housing types for, to match workforce needs. So at a variety of price points. Transit, world-class transit, kind of a broader connected transportation system, and a site that could serve as an economic catalyst for the broader region in the state. Next slide. So some of you may know some of my background is in public policy, and I've worked for many years up at the state legislature. I have very rarely seen a time where the legislature pretty much takes verbatim what the public said that they wanted and then puts that into law. But that's exactly what the legislature did in 2018 when they created our client, the Point of the Mountain State Land Authority. So the same bill that created the land authority also articulated their mandate. And you'll see those bulleted items here. Everything from, and these will sound familiar to you because this was exactly what was identified in the vision, you know, high quality jobs, strategic growth, improving quality of life, kind of a live, work, and play environment there at the site, vibrant urban centers, housing types at all price points, connected trails, and so on. So you can kind of see that like our starting point was based on a foundation of robust public engagement. Next slide. Just to put things into context for where we're at, and then we're going to dive into a little bit more detail specifically about the public engagement during this past year from the planning phase. So, you know, as I mentioned, we had a regional visioning effort from 2016 to 2018, but even backing up from there in 2014, some of you may recall the Prison Relocation Commission and the robust statewide discussions that happened then, some of which were very controversial about where to site the new correctional facility, which of course provided the precursor for opening up the land for development. So fast forward now to today, we have hired an executive director. There's a director of operations. X Factor serves as the communications consultant for the client. And we have some real estate experts as well. And you'll see their headshots here momentarily. So this past year, we took the opportunity to develop a plan for the site. It's called a framework plan because it has built-in flexibility to respond to public input in the future, market fluctuations. We have a plan, but it is definitely agile and adaptive to changing conditions. We anticipate here, and we'll talk about this in a little bit, kind of next steps for 2022 will be to select a development partner with demonstrated success in building out large-scale communities to help us with the site. Next slide. Here's our board. It's an 11-member board comprised of public and private sector officials. Co-chairs include the current Lieutenant Governor, Deidre Henderson, and a state representative, Lowry Snow. Representative Snow actually represents the St. George area. So definitely not anywhere near the 600 acres in Draper, but you know, really kind of showcases the statewide influence and implications of the site. Representative Snow has a background in law with large-scale developments and is just such a great client to work for. We have 4 legislators on our board. We also have the director of the Division of Facilities, Construction, and Management, the commissioner of Utah Higher Education System, the mayors of both South Jordan and Draper cities, and the president and CEO of a private sector real estate firm, April Cooper with Alpine Companies. The board has set forth some guiding principles that direct all of our work. Colton, let's go ahead and move to the next slide. And here they are. So promoting the public interest, really we want to maximize the public's return in this site, both in terms of financial return to the state that can, you know, be used for statewide priorities, as well as the public's return on investment when it comes to quality of life. Setting the standard, we're thinking big. We want Utah to be the crossroads, not only of the West, but the world. And we want to set, you know, very forward-thinking, cutting-edge standards for sustainability, for mobility, smart cities concepts, et cetera. We're really trying to think, at least regionally, when it comes to what the plans for the site mean for you know, the broader transportation network, the land use in the area, ensuring it's symbiotic and complementary. The board has directed us through these guiding principles to also make sure we're taking the long view. You probably heard Lieutenant Governor, well, then Lieutenant Governor Cox, you know, mentioned in the video that we would rather be right than fast. The unique aspect of the site, and there are many, includes the fact that it's owned by the public in its entirety. And that affords us the luxury of some time. Of course, you know, time is always of the essence, but making sure that we're actually getting this right and that we're not just worried about, you know, the bottom line. We also, of course, and this is very top of mind for me as a communications professional, making sure that we are open and transparent in everything that we do. We'll talk a little bit about that here later. And then acting with integrity. I've witnessed up close and personally a lot of these meetings with the client, and everything they do is done with the utmost integrity. It's really impressive to watch, especially because we know no matter what we do, you know, there will be those in the public that, you know, it'll be controversial no matter what, you know, when you're talking developing out such a large scale site. And so we want to ensure that everything that we're doing now is with the utmost integrity. Next slide. As I mentioned, here is kind of the core team. And Alan Matheson, former executive director for the Department of Environmental Quality, is the executive director for the Point. Scott Cuthbertson, the board hired over the summer, and he is our director of operations. Alan's number 2 and kind of managing a lot of the day-to-day. Stephen Kellenberg, our planning director. My team is helping with communications, and then a woman named Erin Talkington is doing a lot of the real estate analysis. Next slide. Right out of the gate, again, to be true to that guiding principle that the board set forward early on, we made sure that we had a multi-channel approach to our communications efforts. You know, just some of those bread and butter things that I know as practitioners you guys do on a daily basis as well. We set up the website, we went through a branding process with the board and developed branding guidelines. The Name the Point came through that process. We had email account, hotline number. Colton on our team staffs that, so he gets a lot of those fun calls. You know, a unique and interesting, you know, factor with the Point is that while we are planning for development at a specific location, no one can like just show up at the prison doors right now and knock on those doors and be let in. And so we needed to have like a physical location that people could send mail to, and believe me, they do. We set up a PO box. And then of course, we have secured handles on all of the major social platforms and post on those regularly. One thing real quick, and I'll be quick because I'm already a bit over my scheduled time here. Next slide. As a precursor to the initiation of the framework plan in 2021, we had 6 months of 2020 where we wanted to develop kind of overarching vision elements that would guide the planning process. And part of our public engagement work was to assemble 5 working groups that were topically oriented. You'll see them listed here. Our stakeholder working group was comprised of state and local elected officials. So state legislators representing the Point of the Mountain region, local officials in the neighboring cities, but then also like school board elected officials as well. And that group was very informative. We also had these other groups, you know, centered around these other topics, everything ranging from education, air quality, infrastructure, land use, economic development. These groups collectively represented about 100 subject matter experts from across the state. So Utah's best and brightest, and they kindly gave of their time with monthly 2-hour meetings separately. This was a lot of time to staff these working groups, but it was very productive. Over a 6-month period, they developed this report. You'll see there on the right, the cover. And that report articulated key vision elements. Let's move to the next slide. These 6 key vision elements, Leah will talk about in more detail. Our planning consultant team, SOM, that we ultimately selected early 2021, really took these and ran with them. They wanted to make sure that our key stakeholders, their voices were heard, and you'll see some specific strategies and tactics that that the planning team ensured were reflected in the plan. Next slide. So public engagement, obviously we never let our tactics drive the strategy, but in today's digital age, it's always nice to quantify some of our efforts. These numbers are specific to the framework planning process, with the exception of that 10,000 Utahns surveyed. That is an aggregated number of the 4,000 Utahns surveyed during the visioning process and the more than 6,000 Utahns surveyed during the planning process. So overall, we're pretty proud of these numbers. We did a lot of work to make sure that we took that multi-channel approach in engaging the public through various strategies. And, we see that reflected there in the numbers. With that, I'll turn it over to Leah Jaramillo, who, as she mentioned, was subbed to SOM during the planning process to help our team with grassroots public engagement.
Thanks, Muriel. Colton, if you'll go to the next slide. So SOM began, as Muriel mentioned, SOM was selected as part of a competitive planning design group process. And through that, there was a series of, I think, 3 charrettes between the any of the planning firms and the State Land Use Authority to kind of hone in on how those elements that Muriel just overviewed really fit. So SOM came to the project with this idea of a 15-minute city. Next slide, Colton. As Colton is changing the slide, I'll just tell you, as Muriel mentioned, she went through this screen. They took these pieces very deliberately, and you can go to the next slide, and really did what they could to incorporate the feedback from previous sessions as well. So this data that you're looking at is similar to what Muriel reviewed and really shows sort of that input from the early stages of the public process before the framework process began. They did that intentionally, of course. That's one of our core values, is to honor public input processes that have preceded your own, and also to show sort of what's guiding the process. So next slide, please. So what we tried to do in that initial sort of selection process was to look at what had been done, look at the great work that Muriel's team had already undertaken, and try to figure out what, if anything, was missing. So we started with this public outreach schedule. You can see here, we began, of course, with our public outreach plan, milestone workshops, and we added, so the milestone workshops were really a way to target the established working groups Muriel mentioned. We did that in a couple of different ways. And then we also looked at the milestone workshop, the working groups, and tried to, poke holes in who was already participating. And that's what you do, right? As consultant teams, you kind of look for any potential gaps or areas where we want to make sure that we are being really inclusive. So we also proposed a stakeholder advisory committee to supplement those working group meetings. And that was, I don't have a slide describing it, but it was really designed to focus on other special interests or stakeholder representatives that were not already included in those larger groups. So we interspersed 2 of those stakeholder committee meetings, and then we added 2 independently fielded scientific surveys targeting, again, the southern Salt Lake County and northern Utah County area. Next slide. So this is kind of what that looked like from the SOM side, right? We're all used to these linear schedules. And you could see that we had milestone updates and public engagement points at the end of each stage. What you can't see here is that, for a reason that was beyond both Muriel and myself, both the client team and the SOM team wanted to accomplish this framework plan in 6 months, which is extraordinarily fast. In my mind, in their mind, that was totally achievable and it allowed for good process. But it was something that we had to accomplish a lot of work and a lot of engagement on a really complex topic that's fairly abstract in its definition in a very short time. So next slide, please. Which of course means that we didn't stick with our original plan. And that's also pretty normal as part of public engagement, right? Our core values, again, are that we ask the public how they'd like to be engaged. We measure our efficacy and we make sure that things are working. And then in some cases too, we just couldn't all arrive at the same place at the same time. So it looks like there's a couple of questions in the chat. Did you want, oh, I'm sorry. So
We're going to save them to the end, Leah, if
yes,
that's okay.
Liz was asking you to put them in the chat instead of direct messaging her. I'm sorry, I thought you were asking for a quick break. So as I was saying, over time, we ended up adding things. We ended up taking a few things out. So you can see where I've added a couple of additional open houses. We did end up actually adding 3 open houses. So that was a total of 4 digital open houses. And then Muriel's team did on in-person open house, which Colton is going to dive into the specifics of those in a little bit later. We also had a workshop and then a variety of individual meetings with the adjacent landowners, right? Because although 600 acres is a huge amount of land, it still impacts the neighboring communities. And in order to make something of this size and scale and magnitude and innovation level and community service that we want it to provide, it's really got to be coordinated very, very closely with those adjacent landowners, land uses, their future plans, et cetera. So we did that. What started out originally as about 25 individual workshops turned into 9 or 10. So as we did our initial milestone workshop, we combined all 5 of those working groups. The second was also a combined one, but we did breakout rooms by topic area. So we could give a high level presentation and then get into the nitty gritty and get some direct comment on various aspects of the plan. The third round, which is stage 3, was actually 5 individual meetings. So we did go and dedicate that longer amount of time to each working group to talk about the topic area. But you can imagine trying to put 25 workshops in 6 months and actually get any work done would have almost been impossible. We also had a little bit of a challenge with the sort of fast pace of the delivery and being able to get an initial survey off the ground that everyone was comfortable with and happy with, and that we felt would be valuable to informing the process. So we didn't do the first one. We waited, we worked through those aspects that we really wanted to get input on, and we pushed that survey out later. And that was fielded through Lighthouse Research, who we really like. And I know Muriel provided some of the metrics there, but we had some really great input coming out of that process. Next slide, please. So as Muriel mentioned, there were a variety of key values, key vision elements that came from the earliest phase of the process. And the SOM team took those and took some input directly from the working group and the stakeholder advisory committee, and used these, what we called KVEs, as the skeleton upon which the framework was built. Next slide, please. So here you can see an example of how community as a core value, as a key, I'm sorry, I keep saying core value. I did that the whole process as well. Every process has its own acronyms. Here is how the example of the key vision element of community was teased out. So on the left side, you can see the original description, and in the middle were the principles that were teased out by the SOM team. And then at the far right, you can see how stakeholder input was reflected. So not only did we say, okay, what is community? Well, community includes iconic placemaking, vibrancy, mixed use, healthy living, opportunities to gather both day and night, shared space for a variety of activities and new residential types, but also what's iconic placemaking, right? We use these terms a lot in the industry, in any industry, there are those key terms. We really wanted to understand what that meant to the stakeholders. So in yellow on the right are the points of summary points of stakeholder input that came from those initial working sessions. And then white are some that came from the SOM team or the Point of the Mountain Land Use Authority team that we know are best practice, right? Or are innovative, which was really kind of a guiding principle, although it was also a key vision element. So next slide. One thing that I thought was great was that SOM in their skilled team was able to take those initiatives and express them visually, which is really critical for public engagement. This image in particular is one that I thought was really useful. It reflects probably 10 of those items from the community KVE page, right? So here we see a variety of housing types, shared open space, healthy living, designed for walkability, significant density, but also at a comfortable scale, maintaining those mountain view sheds and more. So next slide, please. We did our technical pieces. We used our tables and graphs and charts and flow sheets and things like that, but we also did a lot to utilize visuals that were not just appealing, but helped make these things understandable, which, as you know, in any kind of planning process, but particularly in something like a framework plan, where we're putting the skeleton together, but not necessarily making definitive decisions, that can be really tricky. So here's another example, sustainability. That's, again, it's sort of an abstract idea. The KVEs were broken out into still pretty big principles. And so at the right, you can see the initiatives that came from the public, and those became even more measurable in the sustainability plan that was a later product after the framework plan, but at least the framework plan served to kind of start to support that based directly on this public input. Next slide. Again, I wanted to show just another couple of ways that SOM helped the public visualize what we were talking about, and to show how what we were talking about fit, how we were taking those key vision elements and moving them into the plan. Next slide, please. So this is kind of an example of how they put it all together. This is an early concept. It's not the final published one. You can see that, or maybe Muriel or Colton will show it a bit later. It is on the website and all over the materials that were produced at the end of the framework plan. And that's great. I think, showing your process for the public, showing how you move from point A to Z is really helpful. But this was yet another way that they sort of showed those different, not just the different site elements, but how they balanced each other out and how they worked together sort of cohesively, as they called it, an innovation ecosystem. So next slide. Back to this, as I said, it was a really technical process, and we tried to break it down as much as possible. We tried to really illustrate how stakeholder input was being used. And of course, as we did some of these things, the techniques were a little bit tricky. If you were to do a framework master plan open house pre-COVID, We might have had some in-person tours or, expo center level building rooms, rooms that where you could have a lot of people in person with a lot of boards and displays and other things. So doing this digitally was a bit of a challenge for a couple of different reasons. So there was a lot of prep and documentation and coordination internally that helped lead to those being really successful. Colton's going to talk about them, and I have a few more details if we need to. We'll come back to that after Colton gives his presentation. So that you can skip that one. We can come back to it if we need to. And then it's your turn, Colton.
Perfect. Thank you. Okay, so just like Leah was talking about with this process and how fast-paced it was, it came with some additional challenges and some ways that we innovated to really provide value to the public. One of the important things that we've done to really maintain transparency and accessibility to our public audience has been to hold our Point of the Mountain State Land Authority board meetings through Zoom. With this, we're able to not only control, who comes into the meetings, we can avoid some unsavory Zoom incidents, but we also can easily live stream our board meetings to all of our social media platforms. So this was a massive innovation that we figured out during this process. We use a live streaming software that enables us to simultaneously stream our board meetings in real time to these 3 social media platforms you see here: YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter, which has been astonishing. The public can access these board meetings from their phone anywhere they are. And as soon as they're done, the recordings are automatically available on all these social media channels as well. So if someone missed it, if they had lunch or a meeting, they can just come back and watch them. In addition to that, we post official recordings and meeting materials on our website. And all of this contributes to making sure that our board meetings are very transparent and the public is dialed in and they know what's happening, which is incredible. On top of these board meetings, if I can, there we go. We help run logistics for all the other virtual meetings for the Point. And with this process specifically, we held, like Leah was talking about, these virtual open houses. They were much more complex than you would assume if you had attended them. Basically, to give you a rundown of what we did, we held these virtual open houses and we started them as a Zoom meeting. So everyone was in the same virtual room in this Zoom meeting. And we had our executive director give an overview of the Point and introduce everything, and it was great. And then the complicated things came into play. As you can see here with this image, we utilized breakout rooms in these meetings, which enabled us to kind of create miniature Zoom meetings within that meeting, which is great. We had several breakout rooms created with subject matter experts presenting on different topics such as sustainability, transportation and infrastructure, economic development, and more. What we did was we allowed the public that was attending in that main room to go into a breaking room of their choosing with a click of a mouse. And then if they were participating in a breakout room and they wanted to move to another, they could do that as well and kind of hop around. But we had designated presenters within each room that were in charge of making sure the discussion was flowing well. We gave them branded Zoom backgrounds, which you'll see we're using today. We gave them branded PowerPoint slides so they can take notes during those sessions. And we just made sure that they could record those as well. Basically for internal use, we can have a record of what happened in those breakout rooms and the discussion that was had there. So all of this was a Herculean effort, figuring out how to do this logistically, but we pulled it off and it went really well. And the public loved these virtual open houses and they culminated in an in-person one that Brittany will talk about later. Just to give you some quick glance at our website analytics, we wanted to break down some of the analytics that we gained during this process as well. And so, like Muriel mentioned, we went through a branding process with the Point. We created a website. Our goal with this site was to create a website that was kind of the antithesis of state-owned or government websites. Wanted to make it sleek, accessible, welcoming to new users. And it paid off, as you can see with our website users over time graph here. This is a one-stop shop for everything with updates for the framework plan process, access to board meeting recordings, as well as working group information. Just everything you could want about the Point is on thepointutah.org. And we have seen from just this glance from September to September 2020 and 2021, an increase from about 1,700 website users to now over 6,000, which is great, especially for a project of this size. With social media, we post on all of our platforms almost daily, and we have seen a lot of success. We make our posts relevant content for our public. We make sure that they are getting information on how they can engage with the process, on where it's at, where the next steps are, and it's turned out really well. As you can see on this graph, we tracked the total amount of impressions on each platform combined per month during this year span. And May of 2021 is obviously the highest peak so far. And the reasoning is we had a statewide survey and 2 virtual open houses going on in that month. So we had a lot of social media promoted posts during that month. We utilized Facebook's paid advertising functionality to make sure that we could reach as many people as possible within a targeted audience segment. And it performed really well. Other than that, the only other big spike I see is August. We had our in-person open house, and that drew in a lot of engagement as well. With our email newsletter, we send out a monthly newsletter called The Point of View, and this keeps our audiences engaged and up to date on what's happening with the Point and how they can be involved as well. This over here is a screenshot of our May 2021 Point of View, where we asked people to attend the open houses, and that's a large reason why we had so many participants and attendees in our open house. And as you can see on this graph, at the beginning, we had a lot of subscribers come in and dropped off a tiny bit. And then since then, we've had a steady increase in email subscribers throughout the months. And so we've seen a lot of success there as well, especially as it hit its stabilizing point. So overall, all of our communications platforms do really well, and we're excited for what they have to bring and what they've brought in the planning process. And I'll turn it over to Brittany so she can present on updates for media strategy.
All right, can you go to the next slide? So this is the framework plan portion I think Muriel was going to talk about. Muriel, do you want to do that part?
Sure, Brittany, sorry about that.
No worries.
I definitely want to get to the discussion about our media strategy and kind of the culmination and capstone of the public engagement efforts, which was that hybrid in-person and virtual open house. So I'll take through these just really quickly then. This is, as Leah mentioned, the visual rendering for the framework plan. This is not necessarily set in stone. Every single building you see here is not going to be that exact height necessarily and in that exact placement, but some of the basic, backbone infrastructure, for example, is where it's identified here. So the reason we wanted to show you just a few kind of, representative sampling of the signature features of the site that were a direct result of public feedback. So let's go to the next slide. As a communications professional and a public engagement practitioner, I always caution my clients to not make me a liar. When we say that we genuinely want to hear from the public, I really want to see that reflected in what outcomes and deliverables we have on any given project or effort. And we can say that actually absolutely happened here. So this is just kind of a call out of the framework plan map that shows some of these signature features. Let's go to the next slide so we can talk in a little more detail about each one of them. We heard loud and clear from the public that the Point should be an economic catalyst. We are seeing obviously a boom here economically in the state of Utah, and there are some negative externalities associated with that when it comes to traffic congestion, poor air quality, a lack of affordable housing. We want to be very mindful of that and mitigate it as much as possible in the way that we can for the site. That being said, we were asked by the public to ensure that this site produced some high-paying, high-quality jobs. And according to the framework plan, we anticipate about 35 to 40,000 high-paying jobs here on the site. Next slide. Another signature feature that we heard directly from the public and is included in the framework plan is this notion of a 15-minute city. Within planning circles right now, a lot of practitioners, and full disclosure, I'm not a planner, but what they've told our team is that this concept of a 15-minute city is really kind of coming back in a big way. And so that's something, the public said they wanted a live, work, and play type site. And so that's what we did. You can walk anywhere along this 600 acres within 15 minutes from a bus rapid transit stop. So pretty transformational in that regard. And I would say we don't have these slides included here today, but it is posted on our website. You can see a map where the site is separated out into distinct districts. Within each of the 7 districts for the site, you can walk to any part of those districts in 5 minutes. And anyone who lives, works, and plays on the site will be within 500 feet of green space, trails, parks, open space. Next slide. Again, regional business, technology, and innovation catalyst. We heard that loud and clear. Next slide. There will also be an innovation district at the point. The intention for this is to create an institutional and research presence where you have these, collisions of great ideas. We have lofty goals here. Maybe we can bring together, public, private, research, professionals to help solve some of Utah's unique challenges and maybe even the world's. So we're thinking big. You may have seen Governor Cox's announcement about a month or so ago that there will be an air quality and climate lab at the Innovation District. The Utah System of Higher Education, in close collaboration with the Land Authority, recently hired Jefferson Moss as the project director for the Innovation District. And Mr. Moss will be starting in January. So we're really excited about the potential here. A lot of innovation districts around the country and the world have this kind of physical space for researchers, for academics, for private sector entrepreneurs and innovators to come together and advance, the state of the practice in their respective fields. Next slide. So I was kind of just mentioning this, cross-industry innovation accelerators, they'll be close to the Innovation District, but the idea here is to create a pipeline for young students, K through 12, so that we are training the generations of tomorrow to be well equipped to fill these jobs that we're creating for them. Next slide. Okay, take it away, Brittany.
All right, so I'm just going to touch on the robust media strategy we had behind our milestone event, which was the release of the framework plan that Muriel just went over, sending that out to the general public, and also an open house event to accompany that plan release. So first with media strategy, in August of this year, we had a board meeting where the framework plan was officially approved and released. So we sent out a press release to the media at that time announcing that, and we had all the major broadcast, radio, and newspaper outlets cover the release. And because of this timing, we actually had several double hits on media coverage when it was first released at the board meeting, and then 2 days later at the open house, we had scheduled to be after the meeting. The framework plan release coverage before the open house, it helped promote the event. So in several news stories, they had a call to action that the public could come out to the open house to learn more from the key partners and leaders of that project. We also did a media advisory for the open house that day and follow-up calls, and we had 4 media outlets show up to the open house. This was really great because it was actually a very competitive news day. It was in August, so it was around the time that Salt Lake County Council was voting on mask mandates, and it was happening during the same time as our event. But I think our team did a great job of educating the media beforehand about the importance of this plan and understanding that the open house was an important part of educating the public. So I think that's why we saw a great turnout. We also share this information on our own communication channels through social media, our monthly e-newsletter, and our website. We also provided this information to our partners, such as the surrounding city communication directors, who were able to share that information out to their residents as well. Next slide. So for the open house, during this time in August of this year, it was kind of in the middle of in-person events starting to become a thing again, but virtual meetings were and are still popular. So we decided to do a hybrid event. So we had hosted a few open houses in the past as virtual only. So this was our first open house with an in-person component. So we had this open house at a state facility located across the freeway from the Utah State Prison site in Draper. And we also held a live stream on multiple social platforms to provide that virtual open house experience option to those at home. So we pretty much had to curate 2 separate event programs, one for those at home or offsite, and those who were there in person. So what we did is I emceed the event where both in-person and virtual audiences saw live presentations from the Points Executive Director and Peter Kindle from SON. And that took about the first 15 minutes of the first hour. And then we repeated those presentations a second time in the third hour. So we had about 3 hours for the open house in the evening. And then in between, guests could mingle and look at the different visuals and maps we had in the room. And we also had key experts stationed at each one to help answer questions. So at the same time, we didn't have a program running on stage when we didn't have presentations, but we did have a program running virtually to the side. So for that, me or one of our staff members would pull aside one of the key experts or leaders in the room, and we would interview them, ask them questions on our live stream camera about the projects and the features and their involvement on the point. So it was a little tricky to juggle both, but we made it happen. And it was great because the live stream created access for all, and also people could view it after the fact too. So overall, we had more than 650 people either attend virtually or in person or watched our videos after the fact. So we view this as a great success combined with the positive media coverage. And I feel like we were successful because we planned ahead on our media strategy and we scheduled it out, and we were flexible on how we held our hybrid event. So I'll turn the time back over to Muriel.
Thanks, Brittany. I'll just be really quick because I know some of you have questions, and I want to make sure that we have a time for that. So just in terms of next steps, we fully anticipate engaging the public going forward as well. Right now, we are conducting about 10 finer grain detailed studies building off the framework plan. These studies include everything from smart mobility, smart cities, more definition around what sustainability will mean at the site. And all of that is helping to inform the development of a solicitation, a request for qualification / request for proposals. It's kind of a 2-part solicitation that we will be sending out to the broader development community next month, pending board approval. And we will take the better part of early next year to go through a very open, transparent, competitive selection process to identify a development partner or partners with demonstrated success in building out large-scale communities. We anticipate selecting that partner or partners spring to summer of next year. And then from there, it will take a little bit to build out the horizontal infrastructure at the site, bus rapid transit line, the north-south boulevard that kind of bifurcates the site. Some of the major infrastructure components obviously will take several years, and we anticipate beginning vertical development for like the office buildings and things for our phase 1 strategy. You'll start to see dirt turning in 2024, 2025. And with that, we'll turn it over to you guys for any questions.
Thank you, Muriel, and the rest of the panel. We have quite a few questions that came in, and I really appreciate those who submitted them via chat. Muriel, the first question is for you. How did you assess how representative the survey participants were of Utah's population, specifically for age, gender, racial, ethnic diversity?
Yes, really good question. And the answer is yes. Leah can speak to this as well, but we secured Lighthouse as our third-party survey research firm to provide that independent expert survey fielding. We did a two-part process with the survey fielding. We did want to make sure it was truly representative, but we also wanted to open it up broadly to the general public. So we ensured that the scientifically fielded representative survey was done for the respondents that lived in the broader Point of the Mountain area. And we used the Point of the Mountain kind of geographic area that had been defined during the visioning process as kind of our boundaries for that representative survey. And of course, we made sure that when we say representative, we were getting folks from all of those different demographics. Simultaneously, we took that same survey and made it available to the general public statewide. And we kept those data sets separately to ensure, validity and quality of the outcomes. But as we've seen in other projects, in doing so, the data sets don't really materially differ.
Yeah, it was that. Yeah, just that was the goal, right? Our goal was to verify that people who were self-selecting into the process, that what we were hearing from them was actually representative, because it is, we have a lot of policy wonks and planning people with experience who are really interested and they have a lot to say, and you don't know if the general public agrees. And so comparing the data sets, I think, was really critical.
Thank you. The next is a general question. Would you credit social media as the major driver for the majority of the survey responses? Were there any other approaches that were particularly effective for generating responses?
Yeah, it's a good question. The only, no, when it came to the representative survey, we were reliant on Lighthouse to make sure that that was done with survey best practice methodology. And I think that was largely via email, but with random samples. And on social, the only survey that we made available was the publicly available one. And again, those data sets were totally separate, and we can track kind of the click-through, with click-through rates, like who responded because they saw a post on social media.
Yeah, and I would that was why the independently fielded survey was so critical to our approach. And that is actually why Muriel asked us to do two, so that we could sort of have something to compare it to later on all of our large scale projects that impact a variety of stakeholders. We like to do that so that we have that ability to say that it is in fact representative, and then you're not so reliant on those self-selecting in.
The final question we have today is, what is the platform that supports the live streaming using YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter?
Colton?
It is Colton.
Well, yeah, outside of the specific software is called Restream, and it's pretty cost effective and really easy to use. So if you're looking for that capability, you can create a free account, and then there's some plans for how many social platforms you add in. But yeah, it's great to use.
If you're able to find it in time, maybe drop the link to Restream's website in the chat. But yeah, kudos and credit go to Colton for figuring that one out and innovating on the fly. We actually found that more people engaged with us by watching recordings of any of our public meetings after the fact, because it was digestible on their time and on their terms.
I want to add to that. I think Muriel's team did an excellent job with accessibility, not only through those variety of streaming platforms, but by also providing real-time translation in Spanish, and also like live captioning and transcription. So there were a variety of ways that people could participate in the public meetings, and all of the board meetings and other committee meetings are also live streamed and offer at least captioning.
Yeah, Marifel Holmquist on our team, she's here today, native Spanish speaker and our secret weapon. So she's able to seamlessly translate things into Spanish for us. And then it was just really top of mind for us. We actually have a staffer at X Factor who is somewhat hearing impaired and needs kind of transcription. And even for those that aren't necessarily hearing impaired, want to engage with us, but are like in a work meeting or something, they can do that if they see the transcript going. And the cool thing is it's an easy export from Zoom after the fact. So you can have those pretty good transcripts to provide as a deliverable to your client.
Well, that's great information. Thank you, everyone. I really want to thank our panel and all the attendees who came today. We are at the end of our time, but please know that this is such a great subject. The panel has agreed to come back for our March session and talk about lessons learned they heard in this project. You can find out about that session and our other upcoming learning lunches at our events page on IEP2 Intermountain's website. I'm dropping that into the chat now. And again, just thank you everyone for joining us today. We're really excited about the work that not only y'all are doing at the Point, but that's happening all over in our region. So thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you.